Hello, good afternoon, nice to see you. Welcome to live stream. Yeah, give me a thumbs up if the audio is okay and if everything's working. Thank you in the chat, that would be very kind. Before we begin, I will just do some advertisements. First of all, if you would like to join my Easter retreat, there's a couple of places left. That is from the 7th, I think, until the 13th. So it's 6 days, no, 6 nights, 7 days, I think. Yeah, thanks for the thumbs up with my audio. And what else? There is also a Zoom meeting that I do every month, or most months. It's a smaller group where you can ask questions through Zoom and it's not recorded or put onto the internet. So you're welcome to join me for that. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's everything. That is all the advertisements. So we shall go to the title. I'm just looking around for my hanky. My hanky was just here seconds ago, hiding underneath my tray. Yes, and excuse my long microphone, but this is the best way I can make it work without hitting. It's very delicate having microphones and boobs, and whoever invented them didn't anticipate breathing and the bend and the curve of a woman's chest. So sometimes when you get that, it's because it's hitting against me. So I've come up with this idea of a hair clip to try and like push it out more. Yeah. But that's really irrelevant. Okay, so we start with the title. Khaleesi is now going to bark to come in after I'm all set up and ready to go. The importance of going into the sensations of the body to see there is no body. Nice. So I'll start off with non-duality and then we will move on to that. To answer why it's important to go into the sensations to see there is no body. So what is non-duality? Yeah, that is the golden question. Yeah, it's so hard to find the adequate words, because as soon as you say something, you pin it into something it's not. I know that might sound really hard to comprehend. You know, you come here and you're like, look, I want to learn something, and then I'm saying like everything that you say is wrong. But in a way it is. There's a dissatisfaction and a satisfaction in talking about non-duality. Like when you're talking about it, there's a flow that's very beautiful, but there's also like a dissatisfaction in the sense that you can't quite pin it, you can't quite get it right. Yeah, I'm just having a bit of a mind blank this. I just got to start. That's sometimes like what helps me when I'm giving talks, because it's such a impossible subject to speak about. Sometimes just finding a sentence to start you off gets you going. So the most important thing is what is. You know, I speak a lot about psychology on this channel, and I'm super enthusiastic for people to delve into their psychology and smooth it out. I feel like it's a really strong political activity if you like just to look into yourself and to understand psychology. Predominantly because I think part of our problems come from misunderstanding of our psychology and other people's psychology. Like part of the problems in society. And I think if you understood your psychology and understood other people, there would be a lot more peace on earth. I don't think it's freedom, like the absolute freedom. I think that's the recognition of non-duality. And that is a coming home to what you are, which is this moment. You know, I've spoken about this many times. When I first heard this subject, it was in Buddhism. And it was very much about you've got to be in the moment. But as I got deeper into that, it took me into avenues of thought and exploration where I began to see there was no me that could be present, that there was something fundamentally here that was always present, that you could say my essence was presence. So it's not that Buddhism was wrong, it's just that it's like a start on the path. Like it's a start for us. You have to become more present, as well as knowing that there is no you. Just 1 second, I'm sorry, but this is electrocuting me. This is problematic. Yeah. The other day I think I had 2 layers on, so it worked. But the metal, you get an electric shock off that. So I was getting electric shock on my boob after complaining about the boobs. Karma. You have a moan. Then life's like, don't moan, don't moan, don't moan, be happy. Oh, okay. Okay, but that seems to be working now. Yeah. So it's really about being in this moment, but it's not somebody's moment. The person, in a way, can never be present. There can be a practice of putting the attention in the I am or the empty looking, which I recommend, but that person that's doing that practice doesn't actually inherently exist. Like, what you're kind of doing is you're using thought and personal awareness to evoke an experience and to reduce seeking. But that person is being experienced as something that's experiencing you being present, which is really beautiful. So you often start off on this path, like realizing that, you know, you spent your whole life lost in thought, lost in activity, lost in doing, lost in blame and guilt and shame and pride and expectation, lost in all these thoughts and all these emotions, and really involved in it, really believed that there's a you there experiencing it. And then you begin to try to practice being present, and as you get deeper and deeper, teachings begin to emerge, which then question that you that's practicing that. But initially it's important for you to practice that. I'm so glad I did years and years of meditation. So glad. It helped me in so many ways. It didn't help me to become enlightened, because there is no one that becomes enlightened, but it helped reduce the suffering of Lisa so much. I remember when I first went to university, it's the first time I'd lived away from home, and in England you get given a dormitory, which is really nice, a dormitory room. Like, I'm not complaining about that. It was a really nice room, but it was very small and very simple and very basic, which again is not a problem. But I remember when I didn't have university and I didn't have like something on, just this like immense feeling of not knowing what to do with myself. The internet was just kind of beginning, but it was sort of way before like excess internet use. You could like download books or anything at the touch of your finger. I had a little TV in my room with a video player. I don't think I had a TV license or anything, so I could just watch videos. I did have a computer, but I don't think it was connected to the internet. And I think I had a cell phone where I could text people. And I remember like really clinging to my boyfriend at the time, and like clinging to people I knew, because I didn't know what to do with myself with this spare time. Somehow prior to that, like I'd had my activities, I grew up, I went to school, I had a routine which I knew what to do. But I had lots of free time which I didn't know what to do with. And I remember feeling very afraid, even though I wouldn't say that, but like feeling this immense loneliness. And it was during that time that I came in contact with meditation, a bit later. But yeah, that was so helpful, because what meditation did was it made me okay with complete boredom, complete loneliness, and complete fear. So I got used to sitting through uncomfortable situations and uncomfortable feelings and not taking them as my reality. You know, I do like these retreats where you did 10 hours of meditation a day. You weren't allowed a phone, you had to hand it in the beginning, you weren't allowed books to read. So it was like when you didn't meditate, you just had to sit there and like look at the wall or walk around the fields. I don't think you were allowed off the property. And you only got 2 meals a day. Your last meal was at like 12 o'clock at lunchtime. Yeah, and I think like being given a duty of washing up was like, yeah. So doing these retreats and learning to sit with myself, like I feel really had a huge impact on me, because it meant that I could deal with situations and not be running out seeking externally in order to satisfy them. So rather than waking up in fear of what am I going to do today, I could know that if nothing worked out, if nothing happened, if I was alone all day or for the next 2 days, I could meditate, and whatever feelings came up, I would be okay with. I mean, sometimes it was intense. I remember once I was like 25 or 26 and I tried to do a solo retreat in the middle of nature. And I rented this place and this hut near a Buddhist retreat center. And I didn't anticipate that the retreat center would be empty and there'd be nobody there. So I was like in this hut in the middle of nature with nobody around. And it was okay in the day, but as it began to be dark, it became less okay with me. I think I made like 5 nights out of the 7. I think on the 5th day I was like, I can't do another night. Yeah. And this was like no internet, no TV, no anything, no phone. Yeah. But then there begins to be a questioning. You get to a certain stage of practicing that, and then it's like there is a deeper and deeper questioning. It's like everything. It always wants to expand. And then you're like, but who is that person that is meditating? Who is this I that's practicing? It doesn't mean don't meditate. I still sit now. I don't really call it meditation, but I still do lots of sitting and I do breathing exercises. So it doesn't mean don't do it. I'm not saying do or don't. I'm just questioning, who is this person? And what you notice as your mind gets stiller and as your emotions get stiller is that there's something that's watching that. So that is appearing in what I would call a big consciousness. So there is something that is conscious of this person. And who is that? It's like really mind-boggling and really surprising. Who is conscious of that person? And that consciousness is still. It's not in movement. And it's also got a best friend called the I am, this sense of being, this aliveness. But this consciousness, we'll just stick with the consciousness, is still and not moving. So everything is moving in it. The person, the thoughts, the sensations, the ideas, the world, the light, the colours. I don't know if you can see it, but I have a one of those rainbow crystals on the balcony, and so in the room there's like rainbows dancing. Yeah, you can't see it. The weather is so warm here. It's quite amazing. You can't even see the back of the room. There's so much light. And that consciousness is looking through all eyes. So it's looking through both our eyes now. So what you might notice is that mind is like really looking to try to understand what I'm saying, like where is this place? What is she talking about? Like trying to understand it. And notice that there's something watching those thoughts. There's something which is looking through. That's watching those thoughts. That's perfectly still. And it's also got this sense of immense being, this I am, that's completely impersonal. It doesn't belong to anything. It's just there all the time. It's the birthright. It's not like you turn it on or you switch it on. It might feel like in the beginning that you're working for it by becoming more present or calming yourself down. But through time of getting to know it and exploring, you realize that it's always there. It never shifts. What comes is a you which is more thick and less thick, and when it's like really thick and dense and suffering, then there's an absolute belief in you and the world and what's going to happen in the future, and then it feels like you're losing that consciousness. You're losing touch with it because you're more involved in the personal world. But you can't really lose it, because even when you're really involved in the personal world, there's still this empty looking, this consciousness and this beingness, this I am. It's here all the time. What happens in the human is that they get so conditioned into being themselves, into being a human, that that they completely forget this essence of who they are. So when you look at babies or animals, they're totally in contact with that beingness. They're just pure beingness looking at everything. But when the child gets to 2 or 3 years old, it begins to get more and more involved with this character. And then it begins to forget its beingness, its aliveness, its presence. And it's then totally involved with the character, and it becomes like an energetic sensation of feeling contracted and like that there's something really real that lives and exists inside this body. Whereas non-duality is completely machine gunning the idea that there is a soul that lives inside this body. It says that this soul that you take yourself to be, this person, is a collection of feelings, sensations, ideas and thoughts, giving the appearance that there's somebody experiencing. And it doesn't say that that's got to disappear, it's just that the attachment to that's got to disappear. So there's the realization that there is no solid you, but there's a character that pops up and disappears and changes and evolves that has to come with these bodies in order for you to interact in a sophisticated world with a sophisticated world. But that's not actually experiencing. That person isn't actually alive. When there's complete identification, there's a belief that that person is alive and that that person is experiencing this life, and that that person can die when the body dies. Whereas that person was never alive. The character dies more than likely with the body, although I do kind of believe in like rebirth, so I believe that habits and conditions are reborn. So yeah, that's a bit confusing. But who you essentially are, so the empty looking and that sense of beingness, can't die because it was never born. It never leaves. It's just here experiencing itself. And it doesn't have boredom. It doesn't think, oh my God, this is too much life. This is too much I'm experiencing. It doesn't have difficulties or worries or anxiety. It's pure love experiencing itself. This complete contentment. Consciousness doesn't have any gripe with climate change, with the craziness of humanity, with time passing. With all other things that people have a problem with, it cannot have a problem because it's all things and no things. So these problems appear in it, but it doesn't inherently have it. It's free and boundless and never suffered. This is an energetic shift from being totally contracted and identified with this person to a letting go of that, and there's an energetic expansion, and then the character is arising and disappearing in this, but no longer experiencing. You are not the character. The character is not experiencing. The character is something that comes and goes. Who you are is this spaciousness. So, to take it back to the title, I have to remind myself what the title is. Where are we? So part of the practice of meditation practices are often going into the body. A lot of people live just in the head. So they're just up here in the head, behind the eyes, and they feel like that's where their center is. And maybe some people are more in the body and feel their emotions, but a lot of people live as if they're in the head, and they're living in a narration of what's happening rather than an experience, an embodied experience of what's happening. So say when they go to the grocery shop and somebody is rude to them, they have a narrative of what's going on rather than feeling what's happening in the body. So what might be happening in the body is you feel embarrassed or shamed or afraid. So you might have like pain in the heart, or if you're afraid, in the sacral chakra or in the solar plexus, or you might feel angry. So rather than, normally with the anger, there's something deeper than the anger. Yeah, there's levels of it. You get deeper and deeper. Like it's crossing boundaries or fear or something. But normally what happens is that happens, so somebody's rude to you in the shop, and then there's a narration of what's happening. So they're a bad person, how dare they do that? And you're not really aware of like the vulnerability of what you feel in your body. You're more aware of the narrative that you're telling yourself about that person. The same at work. And the reason that this is important is because it's kind of through this that you begin to see the emptiness of all things. Like it's because feelings are empty, and feelings aren't the enemy. When you're in your mind, it's like a seeking. You're seeking to avoid your feelings. It's like these steps that you go through. So in the beginning, you're seeking to avoid your feelings. So you don't want to feel the vulnerability of fear towards them, or the vulnerability of feeling embarrassed. It's safer to feel anger and to have a story about what an asshole or a terrible person they are. There is like a reluctance to feel that. And when you're in the narration, there is a very solid you and a very fixed you that's seeking. It's seeking to avoid its feelings, and it's seeking to sustain a narrative of who it is. And it's like imagining and using its like storytelling functioning and believing that you are somebody that's in relationship with this person. Whereas actually the visceral experience of it isn't that you're in relationship with them and that they're somebody. The visceral experience of what's happening is there's fear or there's embarrassment. And that fear or that embarrassment, you could say, is everywhere and belongs to everything. It doesn't belong to someone. But when you're in the narrative, it's very fixed. It's very, I'm in here, they're out there. So if you go into the feeling of the embarrassment, and it's really not about getting rid of the feeling of embarrassment, it's when you're in the feeling of embarrassment, you disappear. There's no you in that embarrassment. There's simply embarrassment everywhere. Or fear everywhere. What people often think is like there is a me, like there's a me that's self-conscious and embarrassed in that moment. That's not necessarily true. It could just be a conditioned response. It could be if you're imagining an image of yourself and it's like an energetic feeling. But there could actually just be a response and it doesn't belong to anybody. It's just everywhere. There's just embarrassment happening. And it's kind of safe to have that embarrassment. Because it doesn't belong to someone. And it's uncomfortable, but it doesn't need to go anywhere. The narration of the person always has an idea of what it wants to be and what it wants to stay in, the stories of itself. So coming to the body is like doing the opposite. It's like coming away from your narrative of what's happening and back to the actual sensations. But that's a whole process in itself, because often it's hard to get to the sensation of what you're actually feeling. It's like there's built up stories, so you've got like layers on it. So you might feel that you're feeling angry, but really what you're feeling is fear or embarrassment, or maybe even shame. Shame, yeah, shame's a funny one. Depends how we interpret shame. Yeah. I used to think that what waking up was getting rid of all these feelings and having like a very stable feeling body. I actually discovered that the feeling body does become, well, for me did become quite stable, but I don't know if that's the same case for everybody, because if you have this happen to you when you're in your 60s, your body might have a habit of unstable feelings. But I found it did become quite stable. I mean, I still have ups and downs and can have all types of emotions. Nothing's, out of the ballpark. Like the other day, me and Khaleesi got really aggressively attacked by 2 dogs, and I did swear quite a bit. After they came back, the owner couldn't control them, so they attacked us. Then we managed to separate them. And then as I'm walking away, they attacked us again. And I'm talking like full on trying to bite Khaleesi. And I get this warrior in me that won't let them do it. So I pick Khaleesi up, but then that means they're jumping at me as well. It was like, I thought I was going to get bitten. And then the third time that she let them come at me, it's quite intense, 2 big dogs going at you like that. I was swearing. Because I was afraid. I was afraid that they were going to hurt Khaleesi. She's not the healthiest of dogs anymore. I was afraid they were going to bite me. And I was afraid that she was never going to be able to get them under control. And then we're kind of like stuck with no one really around us. And then how do I fend off 2 big dogs? Like, it was I was shaking at the end of that interaction. After the 5th time, I was shaking. In the end, she got in her car and drove off. And there was one dog that was quite well behaved, but it was beginning to join in. Like it was going for it when its mate was. They do that, dogs. And then she drove off, and the dogs chased after her, and then she got them in the car. I don't know if she didn't have leads or what was going on there. I've never experienced something like that. Like dogs have fights, but normally the owner can then get the dog and you drag them apart. But I was like, I couldn't believe it. That was quite a way away from them. And then they came for us again. I was like, no, to the dogs. So I have like emotional capacity, and I feel sorry now that I was swearing at her, but I also find it really understandable. I wasn't really doing at her. I was just like, effing hell. Like, I was like overwhelmed. Yeah. And what was I saying? What was the point to that? Like talking about emotions. But these are feelings. So then afterwards, like when she had driven away, I had to like walk and shake my body. And Khaleesi had to have a good shake as well, I think. Let that fear dissipate out of the body. But it doesn't belong to anyone, and I don't have any resentment towards her. I feel actually sorry for her that she doesn't know how to control her dogs, and I feel compassion for her. Like that must have been really scary for her. I'm not sure if that's the first time that happened to her. but she seemed genuinely overwhelmed. And if I saw her again, I wouldn't have any issue with her at all. But in the experience of it, when I was walking away, it was like the body was a bit traumatized. Like, I was shaking. Yeah, and I used to think that like an enlightened person in that situation, or what enlightenment was that they would like go into meditation and fend off the dogs through the power of the mind and the power of meditation. I'd be like, hum, and everyone would go peaceful. Maybe that is possible, but I've just never experienced that. Like, we don't know in the end. But it's not about not having feelings. It's about coming to the feelings and really honoring and accepting them and seeing the lack of identity in there. There wasn't a me and her in relationship. There's only me and her when we speak about it, and me and the dogs. And none of them are the devil or evil. People can have evil actions, but that often comes from messed up psychology. And dogs do that. Like in Thailand, they're really aggressive if you cross into different territories and things. Like, it's amazing that we manage to walk around with all our dogs like we do. Yeah. Like, it's but I think that she needs to learn how to control them, because it's the dogs that are going to get in trouble, not, well, she will get punished maybe eventually, but it'll be the dogs eventually that, like, forfeit their life or something. Like, the government will take them away and destroy them. But it's not her. Like, there isn't her there that's doing that. There is a bundle of energy that is apparently conditioned through time, which makes her make those choices in those moments. And there's an appearance of it, but who she is perfect still consciousness. The same with the dogs. So there is this instinct to fight or to be competitive, but who they truly are is this pure consciousness of looking, and this I am. And then this energy arises in them from conditions. What happens in the human is in the identification with it. So identification with the story. Like, I am angry with her, or she is angry with me, or she's a bad person, or I should have done this, or they should have done that, da 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 da. And then this belief that there's two people relating to each other, and the real belief in the story, rather than coming back to the sensations which belong to no one. Like, there was fear, there was shock. Yeah. Okay, we go to questions. So you're welcome to ask questions. You can call in through Skype, which is Lisa Cairns 12. Please, but call me first. And then I will call you when I'm ready. So that's on Skype. So it's Lisa Cairns 12. You can find that pinned to the top of YouTube chat. Alternatively, you can write questions in YouTube chat, but can you please put question and then write the question so I can quickly identify the chat from the questions. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To reach over to get my glasses without damaging the microphone. Yeah, the microphone is looking good. I'm happy with that. Okay, Carlin, you didn't write question, but I'll just write this because I can read this because I can see it's question. So remember to put question and then your statement so I can identify them quickly. The title is quite accurate with what I'm doing now, feeling everything that comes up in my body and seeing which thoughts accompany them. It's Narajis, her approach. Don't know if you know her. I think I've seen her on YouTube or somebody sent me her video. Yeah, nice. The only time, Carlin, that I wouldn't do it is if you're having PTSD or OCD thoughts, like extreme PTSD. I mean, you could say when I had that dog experience, I was having trauma coming up that was also related to past experiences with dogs, but it wasn't really extreme, so it was really beautiful to be able to feel it and go through it. But when it's really extreme, it's better to go to see a specialist that works in trauma or OCD, because you can actually exacerbate it in those situations. So that's the only thing that I would say. So most of the time it's really great to do, to really welcome in the feelings, but there are exceptions to that. And if you've ever got stuck in a very bad PTSD, the worst thing that you can do is try to feel it all in one go. You need somebody that gently eases you into it, and like something like EMDR, where you do rapid eye movement, which can like help you ease into it by bringing down the sensation to a reasonable level. Yeah. Yes, for me, you are describing the point at which we can discover what's actually here in front of us, versus what our projected thoughts cause us to experience everything as our labels. Yes, but I would say that you can even go further than that, and you can also see that there is even in feelings sometimes an illusion there, because even those are illusory. Yeah, because there's also no feeling happening and nothing happening. Yeah. When I have heard emotions and so much thought at the same time, hard emotions and so much thought at a time, I just focus on the feeling, sensations, and ignore the thought. Is that I depress my thoughts? I'm not sure if I understand your question there. Minvu. Yeah. Okay, I'll go down to the bottom to see. Question. Also, tree, tension and trauma releasing exercises. This is a somatic practice of shaking that is really helpful to working through trauma without going into the story. Yeah, thanks, Kate. I think you wrote to me about doing a session. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just get so many emails. It's hard to navigate everything. It sounds really great, and maybe at some point I will set up a time to do that with you. Okay, so Nick, good morning. Hi Lisa, it's great if you could touch on the message I sent you a couple of months ago. Thank you. Hi Lisa, thank you for what you share. I've recently been using the word this as a symbol and reminder of the ever seamless now. It seems to bring clarity on what's happening, and in turn seems to dissolve the illusory self. Do you have any thoughts on that word or the use of it? Thanks. Yeah, I mean, if that works. Oh, sorry. I thought I'd answered that question before, Nick. Sorry, that's weird time delay thing that's happening on Skype. Good morning, Lisa. Can you expand on the phrase, light cannot seek light, and the seeker is the sought? Thanks. I mean, isn't that great? Light cannot seek light. I mean, isn't that like just such a great phrase to say? yeah. I mean, how would light, pure light, so if everything was light, how would it find itself? Because it's all the same color. It's the same. I mean, like with blue, there's different shades of blue, but if it was exactly the same colors of blue and it was all filling a room, how would it find itself? Everything would be blue, including the air and the space. Like if you had a big blob of blue paint, like where would two light find itself? It's like all blue paint. And the same with light. I remember this really amazing Star Trek episode where they're having a conversation with light. I can't quote it to you at all, but I just remember being blown away by this idea of light speaking to them, and light saying, we don't have time and space. There is only the ever-present now. So the seeker is the sought. I don't know exactly what that means. The seeker is the sought. But the seeker can never find what it's looking for, because what it's looking for is watching the seeker. So the seeker is trying to find stillness, and then the stillness that's sought is watching the seeker. The consciousness is there all the time. Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Okay, question. Nick Morey. Good morning, Lisa. Can you expand on the phrase, light cannot see? Oh, you just asked it there. Carlin. I have actually been in therapy for severe OCD as a child. Hey, Carlin. Thanks for sharing that. I think you were the one that said about the feelings. So just be careful if OCD is coming up and meditation, and go and seek professional help, because my experiences is that can be problematic. OCD is very tricky, and it's it's not an identification. It's a from what I understand, it's something happening in the brain. It's I mean, I don't know if they exactly know, but it's a condition happening in the brain, and psychology and understanding psychology can really help it, but it's a function I think springs up. I can't talk enough about it. I don't know enough about it to be able to talk, but my point is that forget of whether it's identified or not identified, or it's happening because of this. Just be careful with OCD and meditating if it arises. You'll know what I mean when you've had a severe attack of OCD. Or severe attack of trauma. No problem, but if you're interested, I'll be honoured to show you. It's not so much about interest, it's more about the time to slot in everything, hey? Isn't that the same for everybody? To slot in all these things. Question, Dan. Are you familiar with the movie Wizard of Oz? At the end, Dorothy has to say goodbye in order to go home. The feeling of melancholy is apparent. Could you talk about this? I don't know about the melancholy. But I think that's really true, because there is a goodbye in this. Like that person, that best friend, that person that you've believed yourself to be isn't actually who you are. There is a letting go, and all the people that you've been interacting with, they're not actually who you think they are. So you thought you've known isn't actually the way things are. I don't know about if that has melancholy, but it has like a bittersweetness, like a wanting to step over that, the wanting to go home, but at the same time wanting to hold on to your apparent reality, your dream. Peter Pan says, yes, TRE helps a lot. I had 2 years shaking a lot. It popped up of its own. Lynn. Question. My eyes tend to move back and forth for a minute or two when going inwards, almost as if they're settling or something. Have you experienced this and have any thoughts on it? Thanks. No, Lynn, I've never experienced that. Like they go like that. That is like the way that they practice EMDR, but I don't know about those that. Yeah, thanks, Lynn. I mean, when I just focus on emotions, I am distracting my thoughts. Sorry for my bad English. I think that a lot of the time the thoughts are byproducts of ignoring the emotions. Like when there's lots of identification. So when you're focusing on your feelings, like so say if you're feeling worry, the thoughts are wanting to go into something that you're worried about. So a feeling of worry comes up and then there's like an obsessive thought of worry about something. And I don't see it as by focusing on the feelings you're distracting from the thoughts. Yes, that is happening, but it's the feelings come first. So it's because there's been an ignorance of the feelings and a deregulation of the body through identification and through maybe inappropriate caregivers in childhood that didn't help you deal with your feelings. So then there is this excessive thought that's happening. So you might think that it's a bad thing that's distracting from the thoughts because maybe you have to deal with things, and you do have to deal with things. So if there is some very difficult situation happening in your life, it's great to go and talk to somebody about it to help them explore that with you on that level. So we do have to deal with things happening in life. So say if your whole life is crumbling, just focusing on the feeling is great, but there needs to be action as well happening. So there needs to be an addressing of that, which would happen through thought. But if it's becoming overwhelming, work with somebody. So I understand what you mean. Like, so say if like your whole marriage is going to pop because of an external factor and you're losing your job. And so then you're just completely meditating so you don't have to deal with the thoughts which go into stress land. Yeah. I think it's really great to come down to the feelings, but we do have to deal with life. And, when these situations are happening, and if you're finding you can't think about it rationally by yourself, reach out to someone else. There's no shame in that. It's like therapists are considered shameful in our society, which I think is really wrong. It's really okay to reach out to somebody that has studied a lot about psychology and personal relationships and dynamics and ask them, how would be a more balanced way of addressing this. Question. Sometimes parts of my body seemingly want to move on their own, for lack of a better word. Have you ever experienced this or have any thoughts on it? Hey, Lynn, I'm always so reluctant to, say, oh yes, I've had that experience because, I don't know what you're experiencing. We'd have to talk in detail about this. Because otherwise it could be a bit irresponsible because there might be something physiologically wrong happening with you and maybe you need to go and see a doctor. And then I'm saying, oh yeah, that's the same. Like, I don't know unless we have a long conversation. Like your arm could be like spasming or something like every day like this. And that can be energy. that can be a release happening through the body, and it can be a really beautiful experience, but it also could be something else. So it's just too hard for me to like comment on that. Thanks for your question. Lisa, please put subtitles. I don't know how to do that. Would I have to write them? I see a place where you add them on in the studio, but I don't know how to get them or where to get them from. But you can write in the box below if you know, after on the recorded video, in the chat, and help me out. Question. Did you ever see a YouTube channel where people describe near-death experience? Sounds like delusional drug trips. What do you think about this? Thank you. I have seen people talk about near-death experiences, and I always think there's a similarity in that there is this love and this light happening. Then they have like a whole story and a narrative around it, and I'm not sure what that is. Like, there could be other dimensions, there could be all types of things, it could be some form of brain activity, but underneath it there's this light and this love that's often projected onto God. And to me, that's the essence, that's the consciousness and the I am. So I also think there is similarity. Thank you for responding. Yes, they move back and forth like that, Lynn. Yeah, I mean, it could be all types of things. Like, I know that my legs get twitchy sometimes when I'm low, or maybe on magnesium or potassium. So, you know, like, how could I comment on that? I feel like it would be irresponsible of me. Yeah. But in my story, I had lots of like shaking and energy body work that I had to do to get like lots of contracted identified energy out of the body. And yeah. Question. Eckhart Tolle said his ego wanted to be the smartest because he felt he wasn't physically attractive. What if that is still what he's doing? Maybe that's what we're all doing, but for different reasons. Yeah. There's always going to be an element of us that's interested in survival, which is going to be about mating. So there's going to be an element that is natural and physiological that's going to want to be attracted to certain opposite sex or the same sex. Yeah, that's just part of what this does. But when there's a contraction and identification with it, then there's a belief that freedom comes if I attract someone. So if I'm attractive or if I'm intelligent. So it's that's the difference. So for Eckhart Tolle, like becoming enlightened and this renowned teacher, sorry, I don't mean to be talking about Eckhart Tolle. I try not to talk about other teachers personally like this, but like that maybe made him more attractive to women and men because the Enlightenment and it's peace and all these types of things, and that maybe is enjoyable to him to an extent, but maybe not. Maybe he doesn't like that. But that's not seeking, that's not suffering, that's part of being in these human forms. It's like, have you ever seen those wagtail birds in Australia or in Asia? You know, like when they're eating off the ground, they always wag their tails. It's really cute. Boop, 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 boop. Like we do our dance. There's nothing wrong with that. We're always wanting to be like, oh, humans are the most evil, nasty race there is. They are so bad. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be attractive to the other opposite sex, same sex. Sorry, I keep saying that. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be attractive, but it's not your freedom. Freedom is what is. So you can do the dance and wag your booty, like the wagtail birds, but whether you're tracked or not is not your happiness. Your happiness is always this moment. Love is, and then expressing love to someone is a bonus. Oh, that's so much better. Larry, I started hearing a slight ringing in my ears the last few months meditating. Is it from outside or inside me? It's tetanus, Larry. Is that how you say it? Tetanus. No, not tetanus. Tetanus. I don't know. How can I possibly comment on that? I don't know if it's inside or outside of you. Maybe you've got a leaky pipe in the house. It's like... Then you're like, I'm hearing the sound of the universe. I'm hearing the big om. Or maybe it's aging. I don't know. I can't comment on these things. I'm not laughing at you, Larry, like that you asked that question. Oh yeah, I suppose I'm laughing more at I'm laughing more at the setup of this. Like, so I'm actually including myself in the joke, that because it's also on me that, you know, I come and I do these live talks and I open to questions, and you know, and you can't understand the amount of complex questions and detailed questions that people ask me, and that's, you know, also on me. Like, I'm also buying into this setup of doing a live stream and answering people's questions, and it's like really intense. People ask, you know, about their physical health, their mental health, and like in the end, really what I know is who I am, which is the absolute, and everything on the relative level is subject to change and can change, and I'm not positive about. So even though, Larry, it sounds like I'm laughing at you, it's like I'm laughing at both of us. I'm laughing at the idea that you think that I would know that, and then the idea that I'm sitting here answering people's questions like that I'm putting myself in this position. Yeah. Because it's also a weird thing as well, this. It's also really beautiful, and I'm so happy people do talk about non-duality, but it's also weird. Eventually we'll just have AIs doing it. I'll have an app. And then they'll like have all the information of your body, and they'll actually be able to answer questions like that. Yeah. Marla. The people we've known, their personalities are the emotions they've unconsciously identified with. That's what survives death too. The people we've known, their personalities are the emotions they've unconsciously identified with. That's what survives death too. Again, that's another very complicated question, because we just don't know what... It's not just about identifying with emotions, but maybe we'd have to just... That's just too complicated. Thanks, Lisa. Carlin. OCD doesn't bother me anymore, at least not severely. Therapy really helped. It's just thoughts appearing like anything appearing. It only becomes bothersome when you identify with what appears. Well, that's great, Carlin, that's your experience of it. I don't think that that's everybody's experience of it, so I wouldn't like to say it only becomes bothersome when you identify with it. For you, it only becomes bothersome when you identify with it, Carlin, but I don't want to judge other people around OCD, because I'm just not experienced enough in thinking about it, and experienced enough in thinking about it. I'm just not experienced enough in the subject, and I don't really understand what OCD is on a physiological level. I've heard people also getting OCD after brain injuries. You know, and I've also heard of people becoming a murderer so after brain injury. So there is an element of, I don't know, with these things, they are complex. It is weird saying hi to someone text on a screen. The person behind is imagined. I find it hard. Yeah. Okay, let's go for questions. Question. What I mean is, what if becoming enlightened is just us trying to fix our life problems by concentrating on becoming the enlightened one? It's our way of becoming special. Avoid dance. Yeah, so then that's seeking the belief that if you become enlightened, you will be free. So if Eckhart Tolle did think that, he can't possibly think it now after like 30 years of teaching it, unless he was a sociopath, which he's not, because like he would see quite clearly that that the idea of becoming enlightened isn't it. Question. One awakened guy said, when the whole becomes enlightened, the world will end. Care to comment? Well, you could see that as when all of us see our true nature, the world does end in a way. I mean, it ends in a way just with one person seeing it. Like right now, where is the world? Can't imagine like walking around in a society that knows this, like really deeply knows it, where everyone is looking from that place of expansiveness, from that place of freedom, and the character is a dance inside that. Like, where is the world? Where is the character? Where is problems? I'm laughing. Oh, you're laughing at what I was joking about earlier. That's good. Question. Oh yeah, we've answered that one. Question. Albie, how can I call you? I am trying to call you on Skype, but it doesn't get an answer. Oh. Yeah, you can't call Albie. What you can do is you can put call me, and then I answer. And then I call you when I'm ready. I've got other calls me on here. Brian, question. When going into feelings and I am, is it best to just allow the sensations instead of figuring out the story? I seem to have difficulty distinguishing what the feeling, even if or what it is about, when there is just pure sensation. Yeah, that's okay. You can oscillate between sometimes trying to work out and then other times not working out and just allowing the sensation to be there. Yeah, I wouldn't get too stuck on it. But yeah, I wouldn't get too stuck on trying to work out what the feeling is, because then you'll get into lots of thought. So if it's not possible, then just go with the sensation. And then at some point you can spend time analysing or looking at that, but I wouldn't spend ages doing that. It's just ways of the mind trying to keep itself in knots. Like sometimes I have a feeling and can't perceive what it is. Maybe not so much now, but when I was younger, and so I just give it space to be there and take time. And sometimes it takes time to recognise a feeling, you know, it's really subtle. Like, Is it a burp? Is it indigestion? Or is it a feeling? Eric. Yeah, so there's quite a few call me on here. I'm not sure. Okay, we go with who to start with. Go Terrace. Terrence, yes. Okay. Just let me put on my Bluetooth and then I shall call you. And Terrence. Okay, I just have to turn this off so I don't blast other people's ears out. Hey, Terrence.
Hello?
Hey. Yeah,
Hi.
you have to just turn YouTube off. I'm speaking to you through Skype.
Pardon?
You just have to turn YouTube off. It's a little bit delayed.
Yeah. Oh, I have to turn. Oh, yeah.
Or turn the volume off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm shutting it down now.
Great.
Hi.
Hey.
Hey. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you really well. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. A little soft, but I can hear you.
Just let me go into settings and make sure it's going through the right microphone.
Okay, sure.
Second.
And okay, so
I've just changed it. It might be a bit better now. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it is, but we'll see. Yeah. Anyway, you can start.
Yeah, I had a question about, I guess, like anyone who's followed you for a while knows about your big awakening in Bali in 2011, but you mentioned that you had prior awakenings.
Yeah.
And I'm imagining the initial awakening is probably the first time you realized that you weren't the conceptual sense of self that you always were. And I assume that the big thing in 2011 is what people refer to as liberation. And I was wondering, how did your first glimpse of awakening affect the deconditioning of, I guess, emotional reactivity that in you? And like, how can you use like that first glimpse, if you're wondering if you've had it, to maybe accelerate the deconditioning? Yeah. And at what point? I assume liberation is when you've thoroughly deconditioned a lot of emotional reactivity, so you experience the total freedom. Yeah. Is that a correct understanding?
Well, to me, I don't call it liberation, I just call it awakening, because, yeah, I think I used to more call it liberation or something, but now I just call it awakening, that thing that happened in Bali. And yeah, I think that there had been a lot of deconditioning, like you say, so my reactivity was a lot lower. There was still reactivity in there, but it was a lot lower, and my personality was becoming a lot more stable, although it could have big bursts of suffering every so often. But that was in quite extreme situations. But for less extreme situations, my reactivity was a lot less. There was a lot less belief in thought, in imagination, in feelings, in stories. You're right, there is lots of previous awakenings that happen. For me, I would say most probably the first awakening that I remember was when I didn't know anything about non-duality, and it was in childhood, and I did this thing where I started listening to music. I've spoken about this before. And I started listening to music and I imagined being loved. So I imagined having a partner and being really immensely loved, like to such an extreme detail. And when I would do this, I would then begin to feel love. So I'd have these extreme feelings of love. And it would get so extreme that I would eventually pop and I would just feel love and I didn't need to imagine the partner anymore. So it would just be love there. And that had quite a profound effect on me. And then when I think that I heard being present from the Buddhists, I think that it was like that's what I was hearing, was those experiences that I had in childhood of imagining being loved. And when they spoke about being present, there was some sort of like resonance with that. But I couldn't put that all together in my brain at the time. Like that wasn't until later that I began to remember these things. And then throughout my 20s, there were lots of intellectual realizations, which I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have had, and lots of energetic awakenings, like the seeing of no self. So some people that's really profound. For me, it wasn't so profound, the seeing of no self. What was actually more profound was seeing that there was a consciousness that was looking. Like I remember, there's like many levels to it. And then there was this moment where I was listening to Adyashanti, I think, and walking in the forest. And he said something like, God is looking through your eyes. And then I just had this like profound sensation of this looking that wasn't Lisa, that was absolutely impersonal. And it felt really expansive and big. And it was shocking. And it felt also really beautiful. Like, So it was that. And then there was opposite ones where there was like this nothingness, like waking up and there was nothing, no world, no anything. So all these different awakenings, I'm sure everyone can relate to it. And I think that they have great impact on the apparent spiritual path. You start off maybe in looking at the psychology, or you start off maybe meditating, and then it's like everything. It's the nature of everything is to expand. So you keep expanding and like crossing those boundaries. What does this mean, or what does that mean? And you keep asking questions. Like, even when I was practicing Buddhism and they were teaching mindfulness, there were still mantras that were chanting that all sensation, everything is illusion. So then you begin to question that. It stays in your mind, and then you have all these big and little shifts that happen. And I wouldn't focus on the end, like on this big awakening, on this big shift. I would focus more on the fascination of your own experience, like what is happening in your experience. So rather than focusing on what can get me to this big end, it's like what is happening in your experience now. This is the fascinating point. This is where the exploration is. Like, what am I feeling now? Where is my looking now? What do I want now? What are my games? Like, what am I playing? What is looking? Am I as Terence looking, or is there a looking at Terence? Is there anything happening, or is there nothing happening now? So it's just forget about this awakening that Lisa had, and this awakening that everybody's wanting, and just concentrate on the absolute mystery of the current experience, because that's where you'll find all the answers, is this current experience. It's fascinating, and it's so deep and endless. It's like the personality and the psychology is like a fractal. It goes on endlessly. You'll never get to the bottom of the psychology. But it's like you say, there is a reduction, and there's these awakenings and a smoothing out and a soothing out. And then a permanent shift happens where there's no longer a character looking. The character is being experienced.
I see. The reason I'm asking, because you, as well as several other non-dual teachers, often refer to, I guess, what you're calling an energetic shift.
Yeah.
And I guess energy is sort of a term that gets used very loosely and is never really clearly defined by anybody.
Yeah.
But I interpret this quote unquote energy as sort of the tingling sensations that you feel in the body. And initially you might feel them as coursing through your body, like maybe similar to the way blood is sort of flowing through your body. And I never experienced these things before. I started doing like internal body scan meditations, but once I started doing that, it seems to have opened that up. And I noticed those seem to, and I assume this is what people call Kundalini or Qi, and if you're following the Chinese system, but they seem very related to actual contractions in the body, like I'm talking like actual literal muscular contractions in the body. And so now kind of when I'm focusing on present moment experience, I guess since I guess like you, I think I've experienced a lot of early childhood trauma, and these sorts of energetic sensations seem to be particularly strong in people who have that in their background. And as I've practiced feeling into the contractions, I've noticed shifting pattern, and I do get like violent physical reactions and things like that. But as I've done that repeatedly, the way I experience the flow of this quote unquote energetic sensation has changed quite a bit. And I notice as those sensations, the flow of those sensations change, it seems somehow correlated to the sense of self also. And so the reason I guess I'm a little bit hung up on it, because it seems like at awakening these contractions open up and release. And that's really what I'm hoping to happen, because once I guess I had cut off myself from feeling these sensations all my life, but now that I've trained myself to pay attention to them, they're very strong and constantly there and uncomfortable.
Right.
And I just have to sense into them briefly, and my breath rate shoots. I can tell my whole autonomic nervous system is fired up. And but I think gradually, as that has come down, sense of self is changing. And I was wondering if, from your experience, you might have any tips on how I might focus attention in such a way that I could accelerate this deconditioning process. Like I imagine those physical muscular contractions are related to some old trauma that I don't even remember, because I don't have any mental images that come up when this happens. And so I was wondering, what you've experienced, and maybe what tips you might have for people looking to decondition these patterns.
Yeah, it's really amazing, when people begin to go inwards and they realize how uncomfortable the body's been. They don't realize that the body's been very uncomfortable, but they've cut it off through really cutting off the experience of the body and just being in the head. And then also I think a lot of people numb themselves through alcohol or drugs. Like I think a lot of people drink alcohol every evening to settle it down and to disassociate more from it. So when you begin to go inward, these experiences can be really, really strong, and all these things can help, like Tai Chi, acupressure, acupuncture, meditation. There's also people keep telling me, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a practice which helps a lot with the release of emotions. It's called TRE, I think. But people have been writing to me a lot about it, so I have to investigate. So there's all these different things that you can do to settle down the system. And I think it's great that you're open to it. But for me to diagnose it and to try to help you or guide you in a way in this conversation is just, it would be irresponsible of me, because there could be lots of things in play. Like if I were working with you more one-to-one, you know, we would explore health, because your physical health can affect the way the body feels and these energies, like the practices that you're doing every day, the relationships that you're in, you know, all these different, your job, your relationship with your job, all these different things can have a play on what's happening in that experience. So I would say that it sounds like you're doing a phenomenal job alone by yourself, and you can reach out and book one-to-one sessions with people to get a deeper, in-depth look at it. But I would also carry on with what you're doing, keep exploring what's happening, and, you know, like looking into these new practices or these different practices and seeing gently what works. And this shift is going to happen for everyone. It's just a matter of time. But also time doesn't exist. That freedom is the only thing, the only ending that it can be. And really the end is right here as well.
I see. And when you say the shift will happen for everyone, did you say that because everyone dies and the shift happens before death?
Everybody dies, but I presume that there's also next lives as well. So I presume there's many, many lives which have led you to this point where you are now, but they're just not your lives. I assume, but I don't know. All of these things in the end, I don't know. What I do know in the end is that right now there is a looking that's happening. So there is somebody in Terence that's asking questions and wanting this dream to end, or the difficult sensation to end, or wanting to have an energetic shift. And there is something that's looking at it which is perfectly still and in all things and no things. And then there is this love, its companion, this love side to it as well, this I am. And that's what I really know. That is without question, without doubt. But everything else in life, like there is, you know, exceptions all the time. The advice that I would give most readily and most easily in this situation is to keep putting your attention back in the I am, or at the empty looking, and then explore the psychology, and that's something, and the energy of the body, and the, you know, and what's happening in the body, and that's something you're already doing. But then a more detailed recommendation, I would be reluctant to commit to anything.
I see. I guess I've always I've struggled to relate to the emptiness and stillness because of the strong bodily sensations.
Yeah.
Because when I zoom out from that, there's all this turbulence that's happening in the body,
yeah.
and that is part of the experience.
Yeah.
And so when I lose the quote unquote sense of self, of being a personal self, there's still, so basically there's just everything coming in from the sense, from the senses, and no you. But that includes violent internal sensations. So there's no stillness, there's no emptiness, there's just this, and I'm not here, but it's not still, and it's not peace.
Yeah,
but
there's
no me.
Yeah, there is. That's really sweet that's being recognized, that there is no you. There is a stillness and a peace that's there as well, but it's just that there is still energy that's involved in that turbulent storm, and that's why the recommendation of calming down that storm is like a really good recommendation, because it's just that the attention is focused in on the storm and the discomfort, which is obvious that that's going to happen. And then there'll be moments when that's not so strong, and there is this expansiveness that's there, that's empty and free and looking through you now and not identified with anything.
So, but you think it is possible to recognize the peace and stillness even in the midst of very turbulent and violent physical bodily sensations?
Yes.
So you can.
Yeah. I mean, that's what happened.
That's not necessarily a disqualifier.
No, that's what happened with Eckhart Tolle.
That is what I struggle with.
Yeah, that's what happened with Eckhart Tolle, is that he Eckhart Tolle's story is that he was in absolute hell, and I think also Byron Katie. So those aren't precluders. There is some form of surrender that happened in both cases.
But my understanding is when that big shift happened, though, that I assume, and this could be a wrong assumption, I assume that those violent sensations suddenly calmed down for them.
Could be.
But I could be wrong, but that's what I thought was implied, that he was suicidal, going crazy, and then boom, he had the big thing. And I think, like for Eckhart Tolle, when he woke up, it was just peace. But I'm not sure.
I'm not sure because I've not been in everybody's experience or done like a scientific experiment to see how this manifests in everybody else. One thing that I do know is that when I commit to something too strongly, I normally get contradicted. Like, so I don't know in the end. Like, there's a good chance, but who knows? So I would go more the other way now and just look, because we can't say a certainty. I would say now look at that part in you which is hoping that those feelings will go away, and kind of include that person or that part of that person that's looking and hoping that these really violent, difficult sensations will go away, and that energy is really allowed here. Like, really bring it into experience and see that energy pops up, and then starts imagining the future and imagining when these experiences are going to go away, and notice that there's something that's experiencing that. So that energy of the one that's hoping that these feelings will go away is appearing in experiencing. It's not the experiencer. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to see it. Anything that's seen in this world isn't the experiencer. You could also say is the experiencer, but that's we're just pointing backwards at the moment. But it isn't the experiencer. The experiencer is only experiencing. The thought that energy that's saying I'm hoping that in the future this will stop, that's being witnessed. There's something that knows that's appearing in consciousness. That entity, that thought isn't inherently awake. Something is watching that. That's a play coming in this, and it's just noticing that there is a watching of that.
But the watching isn't separate from the experience itself. So there is no separate experiencer from the experience. So part of the experience is violent sensations, then the watching is also violent sensation.
It's also still and empty and nothing.
I'll try to explore that more.
Yeah.
That's the part I'm having difficulty connecting to.
Yeah.
In the midst of those sensations. But
that's why I was trying to go backwards to what can sometimes happen. So part of the awakenings is that you can have this separation where the consciousness separates out from the experience, and that's an experience in itself. But in that, then it becomes really clear the emptiness and the stillness and the nothingness in the experience. There's all these different things that can seemingly happen, and they all chop away at different parts of the illusion. But then that separation, so then that too then has to go back into everything. So that's also just a stage, because you're right, the consciousness is all things, so it is also the violent movement. Yeah.
I see.
Such a full-on subject, isn't it?
Yes. I see. But the other point I wanted to check in with you though, but prior to your big awakening shift, you still had, I guess, improvements in the quality of your life along this path, right?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, you weren't just doing this, slogging it out for nothing. I mean, you were experiencing, I guess, improved quality or experience of life along the way.
No, I was having some big waves of suffering right up to the end. But generally what I was experiencing more and more was that I was happy in the moment, and I began to care less and less about waking up, because there was like this expansion that was happening that I didn't recognize was expansion, but it meant that what I was really like enjoying the moment. I was really enjoying drinking my tea or doing the gardening or doing very simple things, and that was becoming more and more present. But then there would still be these big waves of difficulty that would come up.
And they didn't, and that didn't happen after 2011.
There can be very difficult conditioning that comes up sometimes, like old conditioning, but not to the extent as prior. But there can be very difficult experiences that come up sometimes, like conditioning and the flow of life, like the things that happen in life, and like old karmas that I haven't properly worked out can come back.
I see.
I think that there's that little boy in there again, hoping for this place of, it's like a little boy energy, like hoping for this place. So it's like, when I get to this place, nothing bad is going to happen again. It's like really investigate that voice and that energy and see where it's felt in the body. Because that too is illusory, like this imagination of when I get to this place. It's been helpful because it's helped you explore things and do different things, but it's also at some point has to disappear. Like, when I get to this place, like, why is it saying that? And then I know what the answer is. It's because there's like these difficult energies that you want to get rid of. It's understandable, but it's allowing that voice in rather than believing that voice.
Yes, that's a good point. Actually, what that brings up is the little boy's voice is like, it wants to get to this place where things get quote unquote fixed so I can get on with my life, even though I totally know that's the exact opposite of what this point, of the point that this is. But somehow, I guess that somehow gets to remain in the back of your mind, even if intellectually you think you've understood it and know that that's not what's going to happen.
Yeah. So just notice if that is a parent's voice. So is it a parent's voice that's coming up that's saying, you have to behave, you have to be a certain way, and you have to then work. Like, everything's about work, everything's about doing something for the future and getting on and growing. Just noticing like what is like going deeper and deeper into that thought. And then you could also explore, is the hopelessness in this? If I don't perform for my parents, if I don't get on, am I, like, what happens to me? Am I loved? Am I abandoned? Am I rejected? There's great depths in these thoughts that they pass as like, this is a very innocent thought, when am I going to make it to enlightenment? But when you explore it, you can unravel lots of energies that are in the body holding on.
Yes, you're right. Thank you. It's totally a parent's voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I'll have to meditate on more.
Yeah, we're just fascinating. Like this subject is fascinating and endless. It's like it's such an amazing investigation. And when we begin to see it in this light, like I look at my situation now and it's an investigation, so when I'm in difficult situations, because difficult situations are going to arise in life, because that's just the nature, everything grows and then is destroyed, grows and destroyed. So there is difficult situations we have to deal with. It's an investigation. Like, how is this Lisa character going to manage this? Like, what is she going to do now? Like, what thoughts is she going to have? What feelings is she going to have? What are other people going to have? Like, it's fascinating. And it's getting that curiosity about our experience. Sorry, I struggled saying that word. About our experience, like what is happening now? Rather than this energy that's always looking to the future. Like, I must be this, I must be that. I need to get to here in order for this to happen. That's like the education system and parents and, society. Rather than what is happening now.
Did you have to go through a deliberate process of letting each of these things go? Kind of akin to one of the things that I related so much in one of your videos is where you talked about where I guess after the awakening you went, and I'm not sure if you were talking about the big one or earlier ones, but what you had to go through a process of a lot of crying over giving up all of your memory, over letting go of your memories. And that really touched me too, because I realized how attached I am to my memories. And I was wondering, oh gosh, do I have to go through that process of surrendering all the, like individually, all those attachments to all those memories? And yes, and that's totally gonna make me cry if I do that.
There's a good chance you do, but it's different for everybody. There's such depth to this, and there's such depth to experiencing, and the human evolution is endless. So Lisa's ability and Terence's ability to evolve and to change is endless, just like the universe, just like every other species and every other plant and every other being on this planet. So on the human level, it never ends. There's endlessly possibility to explore. But what can happen is there can be a shift from it being you as a character that's experiencing to this no thing that's experiencing, this emptiness that's experiencing with that love side, the I am.
Would you say you were only able to surrender those memories after you had some initial glimpse experiences? Because if you're fully identified as the character, there's no way you're going to give up those memories.
Yeah, and I would say that also the psychology, so working on my psychology only worked in conjunction with, for me, with non-duality and with having awakenings and seeing an impersonality to it all. Like, for me, it had to have an impersonality for me to be able to step back and to really change and explore and admit things. Like admitting the shadow, I'm not sure if you've done that yet. That's like really intense. Like, I don't know how people do that when they believe the shadow is themselves. Like, I went through one process of having to admit that I could be the worst person in the whole universe. You know, like admitting certain circumstances, and I could, you know, be the monster in the story. That certain circumstances occurred, you know, so there's all different things that arise in the process. Yeah.
I see.
Nice. Wow. Well, thank you for calling in. I really enjoyed all your questions.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I really appreciate being able to speak with you.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and all the best with everything. Lots of love.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, so some people that I didn't get to call on Skype. Thanks, Terence, for calling in. I really enjoyed our conversation. That was very sweet. And yeah, there's other people that I missed your questions. Yeah, and on YouTube. But I think I prefer now to just do 5 minutes meditation before we end, rather than taking any more questions. Yeah, nice. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this talk. It's so beautiful to share. I really appreciate it. And it always takes two in a way, even though there's only one. But if there was no one here asking questions and no one there, I don't know if talking would happen. So there is appreciation. Okay. Los geht's. Let's meditate. Oh, sorry. I paused the bell. Okay, thank you, everybody. I really wish you everything, not just one thing or two things or three things, but every goddamn thing. Yeah. Thank you. Bye.